Good. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is Friday, April 18th. This is a special meeting for the potential selection of a new town manager. It is 1 o'clock. All town council members are present. Town manager, town attorney, town clerk, if you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is the approval of the final agenda. Is there a motion to approve the final agenda?
So moved.
Second. A motion by Counselor King, seconded by Counselor Safford. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries unanimously. Next, public comment. Anyone like to speak in public comment? We will also have a public comment after the questioning of the candidates. So if you want to wait, you're the only one here, John, so.
I'm good.
I'm looking at you.
No pressure, John.
I'm good. Thank you very much.
All right. Next is our administrative agenda, is questions and answers session. Who's going to be first?
Michael Brillhart.
Okay, bring him in. Michael Brillhart. Everyone have their questions ready?
Mayor, you might want to go ahead and read the narrative that we have on the agenda
Okay.
under section C.
I will do that.
Because it does set forth kind of what's going to happen this afternoon.
Okay, I will do that. Selection of the town manager. Thank you. In accordance with the town council policies and procedures, resolution 23-182, town council shall have a 15-minute question and answer session with each of the applicants. Town councilors are to have an open discussion of the candidates. Each council member uses the provided ranking sheet to list their order of selection, with one being their top choice. The town clerk will tally the votes and announce each applicant's combined ranking score, with the lowest score being the candidate selected. A contract negotiator from town council is selected, and the transition period, if necessary, is discussed. Hey, Michael,
Good afternoon.
how are you, sir?
Good, thank you. Afternoon.
Do we want to give us to introduce yourself, or do you just want to go into the questions? John Attorney,
Whatever. Introduce.
you'd like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Michael Brillhart. Appreciate the opportunity to be before you today and interviewing for the town manager position.
Great. All right, John, we'll start with you.
I'll be consistent with what I was 2 years ago. Well, first question is, Michael, thanks for being here, but why Fort Myers Beach for you?
Fort Myers Beach has location, size, staffing, everything that I enjoy about local government management in my career would be a good fit here specifically. So that's why I applied for the Fort Myers Beach town manager position.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Michael, one of the most important traits I'm looking for in a town manager is servant leadership. As it relates to public service, I would define it as an understanding and an approach where it is established that the public servant works for the people and not the other way around. The authority and power entrusted to a public servant is temporary and on loan from the people. This should manifest itself in a spirit of humility and a desire to put the needs of the citizenry first before one's ego or personal agenda. Do you share that approach to governing and leadership? And if so, please provide some specific examples.
Yes, a public leader, a public servant is the same thing, because when you're leading, you also have to be a public servant. And a public servant leader is someone who cares about the jurisdiction that they're working for, all people involved, including citizens, businesses, and of course the elected council. So it's very critical to me to be a servant leader, to be able to serve the public, to provide the services and operations necessary to have a successful quality of life.
Thank you.
Council Woodson?
Can you briefly summarize your career path and how it has prepared you for this role?
Yes, after receiving my bachelor's degree in urban administration, urban studies, with an emphasis in city management from the University of Cincinnati, I worked in Pinellas County government in Clearwater, Florida for 8 years. Worked in the county administration's office at the very end, where I was the intergovernmental liaison / grants writer, who happened to put together a marketing piece for the Penny for Pinellas, a sales tax initiative, which has since been approved by voters 2 times on 10-year increments thereafter. So I've worked in local government since my time after Pinellas County government, gone into town manager, city manager, county and city county administration roles. I love the public sector. I think I've had a lot of successes and would like to be able to end my career here after 5 years in Fort Myers Beach.
Counselor Safford?
Hi, good afternoon, Michael. Please describe your experience managing municipal budgets. What was the scope and size of the largest budget you've overseen? And what were your key responsibilities in that process?
The largest budget I've ever seen is in the city of Wapakoneta, Ohio, 110 million. That included general, all the enterprise funds, water, sewer, stormwater, and electric. 14 department heads. We developed the budget, implemented it, had strategic planning sessions, the required millage rate adoption, 2 public hearings, and in addition to the general operating budget, the capital improvement program budget, which a little bit different in Ohio is required to be adopted each year as well by the end of December. So that's the largest budget I've been involved with. A lot of time and effort in dealing with the public officials and staff in preparing that budget, which would be implement the quality of life initiatives for the city.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael, for submitting your application and being here today. Mine's kind of going to dovetail off of Councilor Safford's. How would you approach budgeting in our small municipality with limited revenue streams and fluctuating property values due to the disaster?
I would look at things over a 5-year period. And when I say 5 years, not only the capital improvement programming, but what I believe to be our expenses over the 5 years. So I'm going to look and see where we need to be from a budgetary perspective, where our reoccurring expenses need to be, where our non-reoccurring expenses through grants, through loans will be ending that are operational in nature, and determine that gap, and then work with staff on preparing a budget, looking at our revenue and expenditures over that 5-year period. And of course, working therein each year accordingly.
Thank you. Councilor King?
Michael, what do you see as the greatest challenge for the next Fort Myers Beach town manager?
Implementing all of the funds that have been acquired through the state and FEMA for capital projects. Those are mentioned reoccurring expenses, making sure that those projects get implemented, and then putting together a budget where you've got reoccurring expenditures and knowledge and as to how to acquire those things over the next, I'm going to guess 3 years, because probably 3 years you could get most of those projects implemented.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Communication and relationship building skills are a couple of traits that are critical to the success of a town manager. Both of these skills are applicable to key constituency groups, including residents, businesses, visitors, town council members, town staff, Lee County commissioners, sheriff, school board, state and federal partners, as well as the local media. Please comment on how you have prioritized the skills of relationship building and give some specific examples of where you have utilized them to advance the interests of communities you have served in the past.
In this instance, I'm going to say that intergovernmental coordination, intergovernmental relations, and interpersonal relations are all the same 3, because they require communication with whoever the agent and party of. So I communicate very effectively with all those organizations and entities that I'm dealing with on everything from projects to programs to funding. When working for St. Lucie County government, I was also serving as their interim transportation planning organization director, which dealt with funding along the Treasure Coast. I was able to coordinate receiving $10 million of leftover FHWA funds that Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties could not use. So I was able to write, talk to our legislative board, talk to our legislative officials at the state level. And over a 4-month coordination period, was able to get those $10 million, which helped build Port St. Lucie Boulevard.
Thank you.
Council Woodson?
So assuming that everyone has critics, right, in their life. So what would your critics say about you and how do you respond to that feedback?
Probably the biggest thing is I'm not an expert on IT as much as I'd like to be. I rely on the experts to tell me what I need to do. So I'm not an IT director, but I think that would be my biggest critic.
Council Stafford?
Michael, tell us about a time you led a community through a significant change or recovery. What were the key challenges and how did you prioritize action?
Recently, Hurricane Milton and Helene came through Putnam County, Florida, and I was working as an interim city manager for Crescent City. I was able to reach out to FEMA, coordinate our application process, work with FEMA inspectors on projects that were destroyed by both the hurricanes. And we got some funding adopted. And so up until my time there, I was working on the allocation of those dollars. So that was really a critical component.
Great, thank you.
All right. Michael, what strategies would you use to build consensus among council members, staff, and community stakeholders with diverse opinions?
One thing that I have always suggested wherever I'm working is that we have an annual strategic planning session, usually at the beginning of the calendar year, where I develop an agenda that allows the public to have input on everything ranging from economic development to the upcoming budget to projects or of a concern with a specific neighborhood. By allowing that, it allows I and staff to look at how we can go about fixing particular projects, working with the elected board on the budgetary side and policy development, which allows opportunities to take place that otherwise we may not know about, aside and apart from having a general public involved in a strategic planning session.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Who's next? Tom's going to take you.
Thank you so much.
Maybe Andy, in the essence of time, maybe we could have Tom, as we're going through the last questions, tee up the next one. What do they say, John? Dead air?
Dead air, dead air, dead air. Oh, it's dead end. No, sorry.
Yeah.
This dead air is brought to you by the local library.
Hello, Patrick, you want to take a second to introduce yourself, and then we'll each ask you 2 questions.
Okay, my name is Patrick Jordan. I'm from Michigan, but I've been to a few different states over the course of my career. My wife and I have been married 32 years. We have 2 boys that are 41 and 24. We have 4 grandchildren in Michigan. Our sons are both doing very well. We don't mind leaving Michigan and coming down here because we think our grandkids will come and see us. So I've been in public management for about 22 years. Enjoy it very much. I did take a slight detour a few months ago to try something different. I'm approaching 60, and I thought, well, is there something different I can try to do? And I did it. I found that my strengths are right here. I think this is kind of where God has directed me to go in the line of work that I'm in. And I appreciate it very much. Enjoy what I do. And thank you for your hospitality coming down here. The welcome was very, very nice.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Counselor King?
Patrick, thanks for being here. Why Fort Myers Beach for you?
We vacationed here 30 years ago. A couple years after I got married, my wife's whole family came down. We all converged here and spent several days and golfed and had a really nice time. Driving around, I don't recognize anything really. I think we're at the other end of the island when we were here. But I love coastal communities. Having lived on an island and managed on an island in the Bering Sea, I understand the challenges of being an oceanfront or a waterfront community. I've managed waterfront communities in Michigan and understand the special circumstances that are involved there. This is a beautiful place. Beautiful place. The natural resources and the beauty you have here is second to none. I look at the challenges that you have, but I look at the staff that you have lined up in place and everyone doing what they're doing, and I'm amazed by it. You have a great staff, and that makes me comfortable coming forth and asking for this position because of the staff that's here and because of your support for them. I kind of came down here blind, but my eyes have seen a lot since I've been here. You drive around and you go, wow, and you look at the damage that was done 2 years ago. But I look at the possibilities, and it's all going to come back. And what's that going to be when they get done with it? What's that going to be when they get done with it? And coming from the north, from old industrial communities, you see there's empty buildings all over. Nothing's going to happen there, and it's sad. And here you see empty or a shell of a building, and you go, man, what's that going to be? It's going to be exciting to watch that. So that's really why I want to be here.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Patrick, one of the most important traits I'm looking for in a town manager is servant leadership. As it relates to public service, I would define it as an understanding and approach where it is established that the public servant works for the people and not the other way around. The authority and power entrusted to a public servant is temporary and on loan from the people. This should manifest itself in a spirit of humility and a desire to put the needs of the citizenry first before one's ego or personal agenda. First, do you share this approach to governing and leadership? And if so, could you please provide me a couple of examples?
I agree wholeheartedly with that. I mean, what you said was the definition of servant leadership was excellent. There's a consultant that does this line of work, consulting for searches like this, named Ron Holyfield from Strategic Government Resources. He's out of Texas, and he does classes on servant leadership. And I've viewed a couple of them, but it's interesting. I think you and I talked earlier, and I said an example I gave was David before he was anointed king of Israel. It's Good Friday. We can talk about this stuff, right? Samuel went to David's father's home, and he brought his brothers, all the sons in, and because one of them was going to be king, right? Samuel looked at all of them and said, "No, it's none of them. Do you have another son?" "Oh, David's out in the field." They brought him in. That was him. Samuel anoints him king of Israel. Got oil running down his face. And what does David do? He went back out in the field with the sheep, back to work, and to what he felt he was meant to do. And that's what God looked for in a leader of the nation of Israel, was someone with a servant heart like that. And that's the way I've always seen my job. It gives me a lot of humility to be in a leadership position in the community, because you're entrusted by them to make their lives better as much as you possibly can. So I guess that's my take on that.
Thank you.
Councilor Woodson?
So can you briefly summarize your career path and how it has prepared you for this role?
My career path in this line of work began when I was about 38 years old. Now, at that point, I had already finished my master's in public administration. At that time, I didn't know what, I was in law enforcement. I thought I might obtain a leadership position there, but I had left there and I got involved more in politics. But I was asked to become the deputy township supervisor for Muskegon Township by the supervisor. He's ready to retire. So I became his deputy, and then about a month later, I was sworn in as supervisor, chosen by the board. had to run for reelection in 04, and I held that office for 4 years. I realized that the politics part of it wasn't something I wanted to do, but the management was. Now we went to Texas for a few years. I managed a large department for Tarrant County Clerk, which was a large 1.7 million people. We grew. We probably quadrupled the size of our office when I was there, and I managed that growth. And but I wanted to get back into municipal management, so I looked for a job. And I made a comment to a couple of you. My wife's doctor said, "You should be in a colder climate because the hot, dry in Texas affected her." It's not an issue now. We have it all under control. It's a migraine thing. So we went to Bush, Alaska, to get back into managing a government, a county, a borough, actually up there. It wasn't the place for us. Beautiful place, amazing place, but it wasn't for us. The school wasn't, for me, wasn't sufficient for my son. We were invited to come down to Unalaska, which is Dutch Harbor, to be assistant city manager there. So I did that. And I learned a tremendous lot there. I learned there's so much that goes on when you're on an island community and an oceanfront community that you don't deal with elsewhere. The costs of projects are, double, triple sometimes. It depends on how hungry the contractors are. I did 3 years there, but we came back to Michigan to come back, basically to go back home. I went to Wexford County. I don't want to talk about really necessarily publicly what happened there, but it was a very unethical situation. I drove 220 miles a day for a year and a half. And then just decided to stop and just separated. Went to Escanaba, Michigan in the UP, which is north of Green Bay, for 5.5 years and managed that community and had a wonderful time up there, learned a great deal. I love serving that community. There was a board change and a philosophy change over what they wanted to see in the community. And I just realized we're at opposite ends. I mean, my job is to support you, no matter what your stance is to support you and make sure that your policies and your initiatives happen. But there comes a time sometimes with a council change in this line of work where it's necessary to just leave quietly and humbly. And that's what I did. And spent the last 2 years, and we live now in Ionia County, and I managed the county, which is a totally different animal than a city. But enjoyed very much doing that. Now, when I got there, Ionia County was an upheaval. The previous administrator and finance director walked out during a meeting, quit, walked out. And so for a year, they had to contract out finance services, AP services, administrative services with a temp, and they spent probably $1 million. And I got there and hired and got the right people in place. It was running very, very smoothly when I left. But I resigned to take a gamble, and I mentioned this earlier. A friend was elected to the legislature in Alaska, and he asked me to come up and join his staff and be a key role in his staff. And I thought, let's do that. My wife was agreeable to it. And I just got out there and learned that it wasn't for me. It wasn't me. It wasn't what I was meant to do at this point in my career. So my boss and I, we talked about, my friends, we talked about it. He said, "Dude, this ain't working." The chief of staff, and most chiefs of staff there have been there 20 years, and they started out in the mailroom and worked their way up, to hit it from the to try to hit it running from zero is just almost an impossibility. And so we thought I really should just leave. So I came back to Michigan and been interviewing ever since. But everywhere I've gone and everything I've done I've learned more and more and more about how to be effective and efficient in managing a community. when it comes to utilities, especially. I love the utilities component of this job. You know, building utilities, making sure they're done properly, making sure you're accommodating for future growth. It's just a very interesting thing to do. And I'm taking up way too much time. I'm sorry, you guys.
Thank you.
Counselor Safford?
So I have a quick question about budgets. What was the scope and size of the largest budget you've ever overseen? And what were your key responsibilities in that process?
I would say it was the most recent budget with Ionia County was $40 million. In my role is really assembling the budget, working with the finance director, working with the department heads, putting together a budget, making cuts where they're necessary, and presenting to the board a balanced budget for them to consider and adopt. I always remind my staff, especially, you know, throughout the year, but especially in the last couple months of the fiscal year, a budget is not a mandate to spend. Just because it's budgeted doesn't mean it has to be spent. And the mentality of we have to spend it this year to get it next year, it doesn't fly. Don't spend it unless it's necessary.
Great, thank you.
So.
Mine, you'll kind of piggyback off of his. How would you approach budgeting our small municipality with limited revenue streams and fluctuating property values due to the disaster impacts?
With a lot of advice and consent, I'd have to admit. Never been here before. And I've never managed a budget that has all of the characteristics of yours, you know. I would do it very intentionally and with restraint, and take the advice of the people that are senior here that have been through this. Work with my department heads on their budgets and make sure they have what they need, but let's, you know, use restraint because we don't know, you know, what next year holds. Be just very respectful of the public's money. Be careful with it.
All right, thanks. Counselor Kane?
Patrick, what do you see as the greatest challenge for the next Fort Myers Beach Town Manager?
I think just seeing through the restoration and the progress you're making right now with recovering, you know, from Ian, making sure, you know, lobbying with the federal government, with FEMA, to make sure we get the reimbursements that we should get. Restoring relationships, you know, with FEMA if there needs to be work done there. I've been to DC and I've lobbied with my U.S. senators, with Murkowski, with Don Young when he was alive. Lobbied with the U.S. Coast Guard at their facility there in DC, with the Army Corps of Engineers, working on a dredging project for Dutch Harbor, and it's finally getting done. Those things take a lot of time. It's finally getting done, and the price is double since I met with them. But just restoring those relationships, making sure that, you know, getting to know all of the stakeholders in the community, building relationships with you, with my staff, with the neighboring communities, trying to improve where things can be improved, making sure the first charge of local government is health, safety, welfare of its residents, and those are the things that we need to focus on. It entails a lot, but I think part of that is you know, presence of the sheriff department, law enforcement, maybe working on a new contract with them, but getting to know this budget and how it works. I guess that's it.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Communication and relationship building skills are a couple of traits that are critical to the success of a town manager. Both of these skills are applicable to key constituency groups, including residents, businesses, visitors, town council members, town staff, our Lee County Commissioner, Sheriff, School Board, state and federal partners, as well as local media. Please comment on how you have prioritized the skills of relationship building and give some specific examples of where you have utilized them to advance the interests of the communities you have served in the past.
I mentioned to some of you in the meetings that we had about my experiences with Muskegon Township and the relationship between our township, other townships, and the county, that we essentially fought a war in the newspaper for over a year before it was resolved.
Keep going, sorry.
Yeah. I think just having a little bit of humility and self-awareness when you meet people, when you start building these relationships with people, is very important. There were times when I was going into a meeting where I was low man on the totem pole. And there were times going to a meeting when you know, my township or what was the Anne Arundel gorilla in the room, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum. Show a little bit of humility and bury your ego at the door and come on in and meet with people and build those relationships. I've always I had training when I was with the sheriff department and de-escalation, de-escalation techniques. I know the public can get emotional sometimes, especially here. I mean, there's been a lot going on that causes emotions to rise, and you have to be able to meet with people, de-escalate the situation as best you can. I know that's not exactly the question you asked me, but it's all about just honest, upfront, having integrity, and speaking truth to people. Not hard truth, not harsh truth, not I'm gonna tell it like it is. It's speaking the truth with love, or speaking the truth with a little bit of softness to it can go a long way with people, especially when they have something at stake, So
Thank you. Councilor Woodson?
So what would your critics say about you and your leadership, and how do you respond to that feedback?
My police chief from a previous, from the city of Escanaba, he gave a background check on me, a reference check on me once when I was leaving there and I was applying, and he said I talk too much. And I can't argue with that. But I listen too. I'm a good listener too. And my wife will tell me the same thing, that I talk too much. But anyway, my leaders, my employees enjoy working for me. I love them. I respect them, and it was hard to leave when I left my last position, because nobody wanted me to leave. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Sapp?
Patrick, tell us about a time that you led a community through a significant change or recovery. What were the key challenges and how did you prioritize action?
I guess the one that I can really speak of is something I've spoken to some of you about. At Muskegon Township, back in the early 70s, there's a lot of federal money going around for environmental concerns. And Muskegon County built a county wastewater system. And it was located inland from the lake, I guess, about a couple townships in. Huge, thousands of acres in this treatment site. 14 municipalities in the county all had their separate little systems, collection systems and small treatment plants. And that's a lot of redundancy. And why have all of that redundancy? They all joined the county, the wastewater authority. They shut down their plants, and we connected all those pipes to flow into one place downtown Muskegon, and then be pumped through a 66-inch pre-stressed concrete pipe all the way to the wastewater plant. And in March 2nd, 2007, that pipe broke. And there was always a fear of it. It broke in different places because it kind of came through a marsh area before it came up and it went down MacArthur Road. And it's broken before, this time right in a neighborhood where many of the houses along that whole block were lower than grade level, than the road level. And it just flooded, raw sewage flooding homes, millions of gallons. My staff and the county staff was fabulous. They shut down the pumps to stop the flow from coming. But there's still a couple million gallons in that pipe that's going to come back. It took a long time to come back, and it flooded several homes. We activated the EOC. My job was more on the politics side and working with the county and the county wastewater on how are we going to make these people whole. Their homeowners insurance wasn't going to cover it. We weren't really sure whose insurance was going to cover it. But working with the county and helping them understand that the best way to do this is just to write checks to these people and make them whole. The county wastewater fund was very healthy. Had years of revenue build up in it, millage money as well as user fees. And they made people whole, but it was my job to just kind of work on the side with the leadership and make sure that happened, and that it happened quietly, and no one sued anybody. I mean, for something like that to happen, and for all those homes to be destroyed the way they were, and no one sued anybody, and it was keep the lawyers out of it as best you can.
No offense, Nancy.
No offense.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
here.
Yeah. All right. Hey, we talked. We're good. All right.
We're good.
All
Okay,
right.
that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Patrick, what strategies would you use to build consensus among council members, staff, and community stakeholders with diverse opinions?
Talk to them, get them in the same room. Sometimes it takes several attempts to get people together and maybe start seeing the other's point of view. I think compromise it seems to be a thing of the past almost. When you look at the federal and the state level sometimes. But I think everyone has the right intentions. They're right here for the right reasons. They may represent different special interests, maybe their own, maybe a group. But just get people together, lay out the facts for them, talk it through, let them digest it, and work toward a common decision.
Okay. Thanks, Patrick.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We got the next one.
All right.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
guys.
so
Thank
much.
everybody. Appreciate it.
Who's next?
Next will be Jeremy.
Jeremy?
Not
Jim
really.
McCaney.
I'm sorry.
I thought it was,
No.
yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Oh, again, Will, you want to take a brief minute to introduce yourself to everybody that's listening?
Sure, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much. I'm Will McCanny, and I traveled out here from Colorado Springs for this opportunity. Thank you for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to transitioning to Fort Myers Beach Municipal Management Town Manager position. I spent a career in the U.S. Army, recently retired, and my most recent position, most applicable, is I was Garrison Commander of Fort Riley, Kansas, which is a city manager job on an Army installation. Installation about mid-sized city, 60,000 or so total population. All the normal departments that you would find in any municipal government, municipal operation. And before that, throughout my career in the Army, I spent my time coming up through as a law enforcement officer, as a police officer, and a director of emergency services working for that city government type structure.
Okay. We're each going to ask you 2 questions, one at a time, and it should take 15 minutes roughly.
We're longer.
You want me to set the timer?
No, that's fine.
No?
John, go
Okay.
Thank you.
Will, thanks for being here. You said you're looking forward to it, but why do you want to be part of Fort Myers Beach?
Fort Myers Beach to me represents a terrific opportunity to be part of rebuilding the community and bringing this community. I think there's a lot of opportunity here to help the community come back from recent tragedies, recent incidents, but also since I've been here and in researching the community before coming and talking to friends who've spent a lot of time in the area, I think it's a terrific community. I use that word several times. And me and my wife are looking for an opportunity like this where we can come and be part of a community right away, get vested in the community, and team up with other members of the community to help build it and help set it on the path for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Well, one of the most important traits I'm looking for in a town manager is servant leadership. As it relates to public service, I would define it as an understanding and approach where it is established that the public servant works for the people and not the other way around. The authority and power entrusted to a public servant is temporary and on loan from the people. This should manifest itself in a spirit of humility and a desire to put the needs of the citizenry before one's ego or personal agenda. First of all, do you share that approach to governing and leadership? And if so, please provide some specific examples.
Thank you, sir. Yes, I absolutely do share that idea for leadership. I think it's essential. I've tried to embody that throughout my whole career as a leader up until this point. My leadership philosophy is very similar. It doesn't start with me. It starts with those that I serve. I start off by listening. I listen to learn. Then I amplify my team to amplify their talents and put them into leadership roles and put them into positions where they can be more effective for the team. And then I empower them to do that. And I find that by first listening, building the personal relationship with the team, I find out ways where I can best serve them as a leader, what their motivations are, what their priorities are, and what their talents are. And then for the team, to continue to serve the team as a whole in the community, is to align those talents where they can be best used, most needed, and allow those, the members of the team to grow and continue to build even more.
Very good. Thank you.
Council Wilson?
So you kind of answered this question in your introduction, but can you briefly summarize your career path and how it has prepared you for this role?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. My career path, I did join the Army right out of high school as an enlisted service member and eventually transitioned to college. And after college, I became a military police officer for the U.S. Army. And I've worked my way up through the ranks of military police as platoon leader all the way up to brigade level command, most recently leading, teams of 30 or so all the way up to over 2,000. Throughout that career, I've had the normal path of an Army officer would with, especially since 9/11, combat operations, humanitarian service operations, et cetera, that were outside the military police lane, but continued to help me develop as a leader and broaden my skill set. Within military police, like I mentioned, I served as a MP battalion commander, equivalent to a chief of police and a chief of investigation division. Moving on after that as a director of emergency services, where I had both fire and police, as well as access control for the installation under my leadership. Served in different staff positions in between, all the way from brigade level up to the Pentagon. And then I had the opportunity to serve as a garrison commander, which is a city manager for the Army. Myself, as I mentioned, I had Fort Riley, Kansas, about a medium-sized Army installation, 60 to 70,000 personnel on it every day in Kansas, and had great relationships with the communities around it that support us, and we supported them. So my roles in the job, and then my relationship with the city managers that I worked with every day, and my intergovernmental partners from the state of Kansas and local communities, really just gave me even more of a passion, for municipal leadership type roles like this one. So then I did have one more assignment after that, U.S. Northern Command in Colorado Springs, who supports all of the states in our country, providing Department of Defense assets in times of emergencies and so forth. So I did get to see things from the strategic level, for disaster response, which was an eye opener, and working with FEMA and the other agencies every day. And then, so really all those experiences, I think, honed my interest, in really where I felt that I was most comfortable and was really my strength was leading more at the community level, which led me to this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council Seifert?
Will, thanks for being here today. Let's talk budgets. What was the scope and size of the largest budget you ever managed, and what were your key responsibilities in that process?
Thank you. So the scope was when I was garrison commander at Fort Riley. The size of that budget was just over $200 million. Understanding, talking to an audience who will understand, it's a little bit different. Yes, I'll acknowledge that, a little bit different how we received the funds as that garrison commander, as the funds were mostly allocated from the Department of Defense down to us. We were part of my job was to build the budget request, identify all the funding that we needed for my different departments, for capital improvements on the installation, for emergency operations, and then submit a budget up through the higher headquarters line by line and talk about that and basically explain to my leadership why I needed those funds. Then eventually the budget, when it was approved, would come down to us, and then my role became as the leader of the staff, working with my chief financial officer, we called him a resource manager, to make sure that we're executing that budget as directed, as we requested. We're following through on our promise, and then executing it as directed by our higher headquarters and Department of Defense. Along the way, it was regular, every other day, usually at least once a week, meeting with my financial officer, going through, making sure that we are absolutely executing in line with our plan, and that we are taking into account any unforeseen, unforecasted expenses, making sure that we're staying within our reserves so that we, maintain that throughout the whole year and are ready for the next year as we go into the next budget cycle.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Will, thanks for being here and for your service. Mine's going to kind of dovetail off of Councilor Safford's. How would you approach budgeting for our small municipality with limited revenue streams and fluctuating property values due to disaster impacts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, definitely an important question, as I've seen and talking with a lot of you ahead of time, talking with the staff, how things have changed so much over recent years. And right now, maybe some of those normal funding streams are lower than they have been in the past, but then trying to see where there's going to be growth, where there's opportunity for growth in areas where we can, maybe potentially increase some of the funding streams in different taxing areas, different user fees, or different, maybe even funds and grants that might be available. But then eventually shifting to where funds and grants may no longer be available because, you're further away from the crisis, where then now we have to shift the balance more towards those other funding streams of potentially tax revenues, user fees, maybe, other things associated with the tourism industry, which is so vital to Fort Myers Beach.
Perfect. Thank you. Councilor King?
Will, what do you see as the greatest challenge for the next Fort Myers Beach town manager?
I think the greatest challenge is a quick understanding of where the recovery is, where the process is right now, where the team has gotten us to this point and where this still needs to go. And then I think closely aligned with that is balancing the development, going forward, the redevelopment and new development, balancing, where you need to do economic development and where there's community development in different areas. I think balancing those two things is going to be the biggest challenge for anybody coming into a leadership position. So the more information that the incoming town manager can gain by listening to the staff, listening to the council, listening to the community, and trying to find out where those priorities and opportunities are to best balance and take advantage of opportunities within those development lanes.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Communication and relationship building skills are a couple of traits that are critical to the success of a town manager. Both of these skills are applicable to key constituency groups, including the residents, businesses, visitors, town council members, town staff, Lee County commissioners, sheriff, school board, and our state and federal partners, as well as the local media. Please comment on how you've prioritized these skills of relationship building, and give some specific examples of where you have utilized them to advance the interests of the communities you have served in the past.
Thank you. Yeah, again, I'll go back to what we were talking about before, Mr. Vice Mayor, that I start by listening, trying to find out who those key stakeholders are that I need to engage with and listen, which generally is a very large audience, but then on the particular issue, narrow that down and listen to them first to get to know what their priorities are, their issues are, and try to then over time build a relationship with them so that we're communicating on a level of trust where we both know where we're coming from, and we both know what the priorities and joint vision that we're trying to achieve, all the different parties. I value that as well when I talk about, interagency relationships, intergovernmental relationships. I found as the city manager there at Fort Riley that we were very reliant as a community with the cities and agencies outside of Fort Riley for support in crisis when we would need it. And there's a saying in emergency management, you never want to exchange business cards at the crisis. So if we knew each other beforehand, it was just a phone call, or even without a phone call, they would show up and then we just get to work. Some examples of how I managed that in that role. I think one of the biggest challenges when I was city manager was we were all dealing with COVID-19, as everybody across the country was. Along with being a city manager, I was also a school board member for the county school board there, because numerous students within the county came from Fort Riley. And so just the everyday interaction and discussions between the council on how to manage the health concerns and continue education, and then the safety of the staff, were daily conversations. Even, outside of council meetings, we were talking to each other all the time on the phones, in person. And because the goal for all of us was to keep our kids in school, which we were able to do. We kept them in school, education continued, and it was challenging, but the relationships that we had allowed us to get through a lot of those very difficult discussions, and without too much friction, because the priority was always on education and protection of the staff. We could all agree on that, so it allowed the conversations to go. Otherwise, we also wanted to do some economic development for the installation. So the Chamber of Commerce was a big one that I was also a part of, and communicating with members of, in different economic development lanes from the communities who wanted to conduct business on Fort Riley, yet had to follow our rules, had to follow our policies, which often were national level policies coming down. And maybe the communities outside didn't agree with that, didn't have the same policies. But it was because of the relationships that me and my staff had with them on a personal level that really lowered the conflict down. And there was a lot of understanding and respect. So we were able to get through those challenges.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Council Woodson?
So Will, we all have our critics, right? So what would
Absolutely.
your critics say about your leadership, and how do you respond to that feedback?
I think my critics would say, I talk a lot about liking to listen to learn and get to know people quickly, but I also tend to be a decisive and action-oriented type of person, and I like to get things done. When I see an issue, I like to just tackle it right away. But how I then see that in myself as maybe not necessarily a weakness, but an opportunity, is that then maybe, yes, I could dig right in, but maybe I'm not the best one. Maybe I don't have the most information on that particular issue. A member of staff might be closer to the issue and have a much better understanding, so I at least need to talk to them first. Same goes with the community. I may not be the one with all the information. So I think sometimes taking a step back, if there's time to do so, bring in more voices, ask questions, and then come to a decision on what to do about the particular issue, is something that I see as an opportunity for me to work on.
Thank you.
Council Stafford?
Will, besides the pandemic, can you give us another example of when you and your community went through a period of change or recovery? And what were the key challenges, and how did you prioritize those things?
Thank you. Yes, I can speak to, we had a couple of severe weather incidents. One was a tornado on Fort Riley, and another was extreme cold for an extended period of time, about 3 days, where we had below -10 temperatures, which for some parts of the country may not be a big deal, but for us it
I
was.
was gonna say that.
No, I think it's a big deal for everybody, right? So we had those issues, but I think it's really those two identified. One, Fort Riley has a lot of historic buildings. So the tornado, when it came through, it really did a lot of damage. And we had a lot of our soldiers and families living in some historic buildings who were displaced. And the challenge there was to find them suitable housing immediately, and for us to provide that for them. And then to identify the damage and see how quickly we could restore the damage, not just for those families, but also for us as an installation. I felt the team did an excellent job at that. And to the budget point, all the while I directed the staff, I said, okay, start counting right now. Start, counting the costs for everything right now, because I want to be able to submit for, some additional funding, before this is even over. So we can really get on to the next phase, not temporary housing, but get them back into their homes. And the severe cold identified a lot of infrastructure problems on the installation, water lines, power lines, and other things that were vulnerable to those types of solutions. So after that, we immediately realized that ours was antiquated on Fort Riley, and the best way for us to move forward was to partner with private and make a public-private partnership with the power companies outside of our installation in Kansas to ask them if they wanted to help us or if they wanted the opportunity to provide power to the residents of Fort Riley, while what we would get out of it is they would modernize our power structure. It became a little bit of a model that the Department of the Army started using at other installations around the U.S.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Well, what strategies would you use to build consensus among council members, staff, and community stakeholders with diverse opinions?
First, it's having conversations one-on-one, that listening, starting with listening, being a servant leader. There's always going to be diversity of opinion, and that can be good because sometimes we get into our own biases and we see things from a certain perspective. I think the more that we're open to hearing other points of view, the more information we're going to gather in, and potentially people can change their minds. I think it starts with relationships across the board. It starts with conversations, starts with a lot of individual interactions, me and the town council members, me and the staff, as much active and inclusive conversations as I can have with members of the community to fill those voids of information in mind, to make sure that I'm hearing things from all the different aspects, all the different sectors of the community, and that we're having a conversation as a town staff about those different voices that we're hearing, to make sure that we're addressing them. Everybody knows that they're being heard and that the issues are being addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
That is the last question.
Thank you
so
for the
much.
opportunity.
Thank you.
And Jeremy Schaefer is next.
Okay. Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Okay.
Now you.
Good afternoon again, Jeremy. We're going to give you a brief moment to introduce yourself, and then we're each going to ask you 2 questions. One at a time, obviously, go around and come back and go around again. So take a few minutes to introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Jeremy Schaefer, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. Currently reside northeast Ohio near Cleveland and Geneva on the Lake. I've been the village administrator there for just more than half a decade. Have a master's degree in public administrations, specializing in shoreline protection, erosion control, and public access. I'm in the Air National Guard. I'm a staff sergeant. I've been in the Air National Guard about approximately 12 years. Started out in logistics. Recently, in the last couple of years, retrained as a paralegal in the Air National Guard.
All right. John?
Why Fort Myers Beach for you?
For me, this is kind of a career cap for me. Like, looking at my whole history, it's kind of all led me to Fort Myers Beach. I talk with my hands, sorry everybody, but so I was a township trustee, really young age, township trustee, right out of high school, elected in a 5-way race. After that, after 2 terms of that, I served as mayor of my community. After that, I served as county commissioner. I just love public service. Didn't really care long term for the county commission because I couldn't make the changes and be hands-on like I could, when I was mayor and township trustee. At that point, I joined the Air Force, Air National Guard. I kind of done that the last few years. All during that time, though, I went to school, got a political science degree, continued my education in logistics in the military, and then, capped it out with a master's of public administration. Why here is bringing all that experience, that 25 years experience here. In the last 6 years, I've been in Geneva on the Lake, and my family loves it, and I love it. It's a tourist community, which is what you guys are, right? We have the same influx for public service delivery during season. We have over 2 million visitors with 916 residents. So I understand how, and it complements this role here, but I understand how you have different types of residents. You have your seasonal resident, or temporary residents that are 6 to 8 months. You have your resident that's here all year long. You have your tourists that come in to the transient rentals, short-term rentals on the weekend. And each of those you have to communicate with differently, right? So I know how to do that, and I've learned that. the erosion control in Geneva on the lake that I've done, we've built public access with public-private partnerships. We've got one construction project we're getting ready to do right now. That's 8 property owners, a township park. We're doing this erosion project and this public access beach renourishment project with public dollars partnering with those people. And I can bring that here, right? And I've done some of that and it excites me doing these big projects. The other reason is looking at your community. And I walked around 10 miles when I got here on Tuesday. You're in a place like it's a rebirth, right? You didn't want the hurricanes to come through and, you know, knock everything out, but it did. So to me, that's an exciting time because I love the economic development and I love development. And I do a lot of that in my current role in Geneva on the lake. But bringing that here, there's going to be structures that are hardened and all these things. And what you guys are touching right now and what the next town manager is going to do is be part of that rebirth of the beach. And you can't stop it. The next 3 generations, whatever we do now as a group, it's going to have our fingers all over it. And because of what I've done in Geneva on the lake and how I love this coastal communities and everything, that's what brought me here. I didn't apply for a bunch of jobs anywhere. I've only applied for this one because I think it checks all my boxes for my professional, academic, and life goals.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
In the interest of time, I'll abbreviate my question. Because we talked a little bit about servant leadership and how it should manifest itself in a spirit of humility and a desire to put the needs of the citizenry first before one's ego or personal agenda. Do you share that approach to governing and leadership? And if so, please provide some specific examples.
Yeah, so definitely, like it's all about the community. You know, as a city administrator now, town administrator, and in this role, you're not going to come in and instantly change policy and do things that the community doesn't want. The way this works is I'm a visionary and collaborative, but everything comes from the council. The council gets their vision from the community. It comes through them, and then when it gets here to the town manager, he's the one that has to execute it. So it's executing the community's vision and serving them. So you're not coming up here, right, and just saying, hey, this is my vision of the beach. It's the community's vision of the beach. And then how you guys approach it, filter it down through me. That's what I take forward. The other thing I do is really know the community. If you come to my town right now where I'm currently at, I could put you on the golf cart. I could take you through town and tell you every business owner, every resident. We could go to the side streets. I could tell you if they're a part-time resident, a permanent resident, where their families are from. And to me, that's servant leadership. I know them because I engage with them and talk about it. And then that helps like form policy in me to have better discussions with the council and the mayor now where I'm at. And I would bring that here. To me, that's a servant leadership, knowing what the community wants and then moving forward to execute it. Thank you.
Council Woodson?
Well, I think you've already answered this question, but if there's anything you'd like to add, summarizing your career path and how it's prepared you for this role.
Yes, ma'am. I guess really what you could say with me is I've been hands-on. I've been in the trenches. I know what ditches look like properly. I know what SDR 35 is, but at the same time, because of my education, I know the high level, what it should look like from academia. And I put those two things together. And what that's helped me do in my current role where I'm at that I could bring here is the fact that we've went after grant funding, right? And that's big to offset, budgetary constraints. When we go after grant funding, when we're applying for stuff, we're looking at these local projects and then we're using academia and adding this academia to those grant project requests from the state and federal government, and it gives us a leg up. So also there's tons of stuff out there. I guarantee, and I haven't looked, but I guarantee if we look at Fort Myers Beach, there's probably studies that have been done that we could use and the team could use about shoreline erosion or different things in different weather patterns, or maybe even from the economic development standpoint. And I've used this before, like trails, for instance. We had a council meeting where some of our residents came in and they didn't necessarily want trails in an area. And they said it was going to actually devalue their property because people would be going behind it and hanging out on these. But there's trails, but there's academics out there that show that trails increase quality of life. And you could, and I printed those out and we took them and we talked about it. So things like that from my experience and my background, I could bring here, and it also helps us build a better beach.
Excuse me. Jeremy, thanks for being here. Speaking of budgets, what's the largest budget you've ever managed, and what have been your key roles in that process?
Oh, I believe around 35 million with but general fund budget probably about a 10 million. general fund budget, and was when I was county commissioner. And I was county commissioner in Ohio. I know from state to state, right? Government's a little bit different. But we were very hands-on as county commissioners with our budget. We were in a smaller county. And when I was county commissioner, it was a time that the housing bubble burst. So we had to cut millions out of our budget to reduce. And I'll tell you what, it was super hands-on. We had to meet with all the department heads, and some of those department heads in the county are other elected officials like auditor, sheriff, and things of that nature. But we did an interesting approach that I'll share with you. It might not work, in some situations, but what we did was, instead of just cutting the millions out that we needed to cut out to come within budget, we looked at how each department and what the percentage of that would be. So we didn't say, hey, Sheriff's Department, we need you to cut all the $1 million out, or auditor, we need you to cut all the $1 million out. We're like, oh, your percent of the general fund budget's 10%. And to get us to our $1 million number, we need you to cut amount that equals that portion out. So that was a very interesting time. We didn't make anybody happy. We actually couldn't fund things like the Ohio State University, some of the conservation efforts and things that we did. But we made sure that we could still have public service on the road and things like that. And was all working with those department heads and trying to cut out and make everything as fair as possible. In my current role, though, with budgets, we try to offset big capital projects with grant funding and finding other funding. Obviously, fees are something you have to look at if you need to increase revenues. And then on expenditure side, you always have to watch your expenditures, but you also want to grow the team, right? Because some of the things that you do in your community increases revenues. So it's a big balancing act. To me, all the time, we should be looking at definitely the revenues coming in so we can forecast. And then, the expenditures, if you're forecasting properly and stuff, you can cut expenditures through like attrition and things like that. So you don't have to lay people off if you know it's coming. So yeah, I have lots of experience with that. The budget size, honestly, I don't necessarily matter. It's more the approach.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Well, you kind of went into answering the question that I'm going to ask, but how would you approach budgeting for our small municipality with limited revenue streams and fluctuating property values due to the disaster impacts?
Right. Well, again, just what I said. I don't want to reiterate it too much, but I definitely, being new, if I was chosen as town manager, would have to lean back on the team like immediately, because you already have some budgetary processes, I'm sure, in place that I'm going to come in and follow. But I will tell you, across the whole United States, it's tough. We definitely need to look at what they're doing in Tallahassee. I know in Ohio, they're reducing, the state house is talking about reducing property taxes. I hear from being down here that might be happening here in some way. So we just need to be really cognizant about the policies that we can't necessarily affect tomorrow, to, again, look out at the future and kind of forecast maybe without it. So maybe through attrition, if we have to do cuts, we're looking forward that way. So it's really just keeping the pulse on what's going on. Also, I talked about earlier, public service demand. In a resort community, you have the public service demand that we're really going to, you're probably watching all the time, because you need more rangers on the street during certain times. And if you get an influx of more tourists, right, than normal, maybe you need more people. Or if you have a storm coming in, maybe you're hiring more people. So you just have to always be looking at the revenues and looking at those expenditures. And again, forecasting out, making sure your department heads are aware of what's going on. And if you have to reduce stuff here and there, you do.
John?
What do you see as the greatest challenge for the next Fort Myers Beach town manager?
That's a question I propound on you guys most of the time. I think it's going to be, like I said, it's a rebirth here from the storm, and it's a rebuild, and it's a slow process. Government's slow. We all want it. I get caught in it all the time. You want things to move fast, but it just doesn't. With the rebuild and coming back, you guys have had multiple hurricanes in a row, and, FEMA still has funding that they owe you from some of the past ones. You got some commitments, but what that does is it restricts your cash flow, right? So you definitely have to be cognizant of all that. And I think that's going to be a challenge, because, the next storm is always going to come here, and we got to be prepared for it. But some of that cash flow from back at other storms, right, you haven't received yet. You've maybe repaired some stuff and it's got broken again from other storms. So I think just looking overall and watching that budget piece, knowing that there's money, the revenues that you just don't have on hand right now, is going to be a challenge. And then, obviously you're trying to build back better. You're looking at how this builds, and the new structures are going to go up, and the hardening of the structures. And it's going to be a change. The new development, obviously, we heard about that this morning. I was asked that question on your local Beach Talk radio. There's just going to be a lot of changes. So it's going to be navigating those changes and navigating what your community wants, and then what that vision looks like, and then how we put those policies in place for that vision and, operate daily here.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
Jeremy, we've got a number of key constituency groups at the local, county, state, and federal level. Could you comment on how you've prioritized the skills of relationship building, and give some specific examples of where you've utilized them to advance the interests of the communities you served in the past?
Yeah, I've got all kinds of examples. I did sit on a fire district board for 18 years from its inception until 2018, roughly 2000, 2001. I was a trustee, a township trustee, and I sat on that board when it was first created in my county. Then as a mayor, I sat on there as a municipal leader. And then I stayed on there in an open seat for the rest of the time. That was townships and a small municipality working together. And in my area at that time in Southern Ohio, it was something that wasn't being done. Nobody was working together as townships and villages to create a district. It was sandboxes, right? Everybody had their sandbox for play. But after a few years, when we put that together and the voters loved it and we worked, we have other townships that joined us before I got off the board. But it was a way to collaborate and put funding together that these individual places couldn't do, alone. And it actually was better to pool the money and then have a better public safety response. Today, if you go back to Highland County, there's 3 districts, in the county, and it's grown, and we were the first ones to do that. So that's just a collaboration of small local government. Other ways is definitely, and I asked earlier to Councilman Woodson about what your relationship was with your state rep and your federal reps and things of that nature. Right now, in my current role, I am very close with my state rep. And in the past, in my other roles, I do the same. It's important to build those relationships with your state and your federal officials. For one thing, that you need to ask for project funding. I've been really strong in Ohio getting capital budget for all the towns I've been in. Recently, outside of doing that, I was in DC talking to Congress representatives from Ohio about shoreline erosion control and public beach access and construction projects. So it's really important, to know who your reps are and ask for them. I mean, that's what they're there for. They're here to help us, especially here in Florida, right? You really need to ask because the next hurricane's coming, and right now you're rebuilding. So it's important to know all those people and ask for funding that way. Outside of that, you have a fire district here, so it's important to work with the fire district and know who they are. I assume we attend their meetings every now and again, or maybe have a liaison to that fire board from council. County commissioners, they give out funding probably. They, in my county, they do CDBG. They control a lot of that funding in Ohio at the county level. So we're always in the county commissioner's office, letting them know what our next projects are, and building those relationships where I'm at now to make sure that they're going to fund projects like, sidewalks and streetscapes and things like that to benefit the community. So it's very important across all levels of government, and even across, you probably have organizations locally that I don't know about, but to really reach out and build relationships for them, because it's in the best interest of the community overall, especially if you want to get things done.
Thank you. Councilman Woodson.
So we all have our critics. So what would your critics say about your leadership, and how do you respond to that feedback?
My critics are probably going to say, like, I want to move fast, and sometimes I move too fast. I like to get things done. I'm very strategic, but I'm not afraid to make a decision. Sometimes I'm decisive, but sometimes looking back, it might be not the best decision. I'm not gonna lie. But you made a decision, you move forward, and sometimes that's what has to move the team forward and the projects forward. We can all live in hindsight, but for me, I want to know as much information about something before I make a decision. But sometimes you don't have all the facts. Let's say like when a hurricane comes in, you guys probably made decisions that you look back on it, said coulda, woulda, shoulda, but you made the decision, you were decisive, and you moved the ball down the court in the best interest of your community. So that's what probably my naysayers would do, is be like, this guy's fast. He talks fast. He's energetic, even though it may be a plus. It's just real. Like, I'm always moving the ball down the court. And sometimes that stresses people out a little bit, to be honest. I kind of push the organization to do better. And sometimes you try to take a lot on yourself. So that's probably what they would say.
Thank you.
So, Jeremy, tell me a time that where you led your community through a period of change or recovery, and what were the key challenges, and how did you prioritize action?
Yeah, so when I was mayor, we experienced straight line winds off the Hurricane Katrina, and it knocked out in Ohio, clear across the country. It knocked out our electric for more than a week. And luckily it was summertime, so it was nice out. People could get out. But the first thing we did was make sure our police and fire could get out and just be in the area and patrol. Not necessarily like police patrol, right? But just the fire department going up and down the streets with the police and separately. So people knew we were there and we were able to help in that way. The other thing that we did, which at the time people didn't like, well, we got some criticism from certain people because we didn't let people go out after a certain time with a curfew. At the end of that, looking back, we were the only community during that time that didn't have vandalism and didn't have a bunch of stuff going on. Now, we didn't go out and arrest people. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is we were very present. We made the decisions of our best interest of our community at that time. And we helped people rebuild with no electric. I mean, you had freezers going out, you had power surges and stuff burn up. So we gave out water as a community for that because it was like 10 days long. So it wasn't quite 2 weeks, but it was long enough. Everybody lost everything, in the refrigerators and food. And then we also, we actually created a list at that time where our fire department went out to elderly people and people that had medical and things like that. So we ran a list and we just executed the best we could. At the time, we also set up our municipal hall, our water department, because it was the only place that had a generator in the town. Because some of the towns in rural Midwest, they other than maybe tornadoes and stuff, they don't really plan on some of that stuff, nor do they have the funding. So we were stuck with really no place to go. We set up at the water plant and we're able to run all our operations out of there and just adapt and overcome.
Great. Thank you.
Jeremy, what strategies would you use to build consensus among council members, staff, and community stakeholders with diverse opinions?
Wow, this is a long-winded, complicated question. Definitely work sessions and meetings. You guys are going through a comprehensive plan process, I believe, right now. I don't know exactly. I don't know if you hired a consultant or you're doing it in-house, but you can always start with some surveys and things like that. Do some work groups, some work sessions with the public. You can obviously do some here with your council. The same with the staff. It's really about creating that vision, right, through those things. I've done some complicated projects. Maybe that's a better way to tell you how I handle things. For the last 6 years, we've been doing a shoreline project, and there's 8 stakeholders, the township park, and we've been meeting regularly for 6 years. And the consensus that we were trying to build with the stakeholders is one, and Ohio's a little bit different. The municipality doesn't have any say over the shoreline in front of those private properties. It's 100% private. And they had to sign contracts, MOUs, for us to be able to partner with them. We couldn't just do it. So we went about it a different approach. The village didn't just say, hey, here's the entire shoreline, miles of shoreline in Geneva on the lake, and here's what we want it to look like. What we did is we said, hey, and this specific project brought them in, but said, if you want to work with the village, you come in and let's create the shoreline that you want. Let's do what you want to do. So we didn't have this this is the plan. We brought them in and talked to them about it. And then we did work sessions each year. We actually got $90,000 from the state of Ohio to do to grant fund some of the planning with some engineers. And we did different renditions of what they could do on their shoreline, what kind of protection works and what it could look like. Do you want a bike trail in front of your house on the shoreline? How much public access do you want? Do you want a beach? Do you want to be able to swim in the area, or do you want to be able to bring a boat in? Like, there's just all these things, right, that we work through to make sure that we could build a project that we could then later fund that everybody was in agreement with. What was important about this was that as we went after state and federal funding, which we have received right now, and we're going to construction by 2026. We're in the permitting phase with the Army Corps and the federal EPA and all those fun acronyms at the state and federal level. But what was important is to get this far, we had to have the consensus built by the community members involved, because once we get the funding, we can't turn back. And we didn't want to get clear to the end of the game and have somebody didn't like the color of the beach sand or something like that. It's a real thing, right? They're looking for this quality product that also then protects their property and creates habitat. And there was all these other things for the funding, right, we had to do. So we we got together for 6 years and we went through these slow processes. We put stuff on a screen, slideshow, so people could see it. And every time we went through the same slideshow, and that sounds a little crazy, but the first time the slideshow was put together was probably 5 slides. Today it's like 35 slides to make sure that everybody that's coming in the room understand, like, this is where we came from, and this is first, and this is how complicated it's got, but the shoreline erosion kind of still exists. The project is still important to everybody. If somebody's brother or cousin showed up, because they do, that own part of the property that we're trying to do in front, and they're worried about it, now they've seen all the openness of what we've done the last 6 years. So that's a way that we put together a pretty complicated project with multiple stakeholders, 2 governments, and neighbors and friends to put one project together. And now that that's happening, and the way we took the approach to build it the way those communities members want in their town, we have 3 or 4 other areas and other groups along the shoreline coming to us to say, hey, we're these shoreline owners. This is what we want in front of our house. This is what we want protection from. Erosion on Lake Erie is a very different animal than down here. It wipes out it wipes out the shoreline. It just gets hardened because people put concrete and they're trying to save their properties. We have a lot of remediation and things when we do these projects as well. And some of those homeowners, as we went through it, they also didn't grasp that in the beginning. So on the current township project that I'm talking about that we went through 6 years, we're actually going back in because the EPA won't let us get Army Corps permitting because there's stuff thrown in there to protect those properties over the years. We have to pull out. So we're doing that on some of those citizens' behalf. So sorry, complicated answer. These are complicated projects, and they're complicated projects across the whole board, but building consensus, you got to just bring everybody together, be transparent, and work through it, even if it takes years. I mean, I just talked to you about how fast we want it to go. We wanted that project done a long time ago, but sometimes this stuff takes 6-7 years. So, but we can get it done.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Bring some energy next time, would you?
Absolutely. Hey, I'm really excited about the opportunity. Thank you all.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you so much. Next is John True.
Hey, John, we're going to have you introduce yourself to those that are listening, and then we're each going to ask you 2 questions.
Okay. John True from Sailorsville, Ohio. And I appreciate the
Can you raise the mic up to you a little bit more? Thank you.
I appreciate the hospitality and the process you guys have put us through the last couple of days. Really do.
John, thanks for being here. Why FMB for you?
I've been coming here about 40 years, and I really like Fort Myers Beach. I've always liked the quaintness of Fort Myers Beach. And then coming back in February when I was here pre-Ian, coming after Ian, seeing the resiliency of the people and the businesses. I retired once, went back to work. I'm too young to retire. And I see what a challenge here you have. And to work with you and as a team, I thought that would be a unique challenge, and keep Fort Myers Beach as good as it has been and keep on growing.
Thank you.
I've been asking everyone about servant leadership and how it should manifest itself in a spirit of humility and a desire to put the needs of the citizenry before one's ego or personal agenda. Do you share that approach to governing and leadership? And if so, could you provide some specific examples?
Yes, I do. I share that approach, and to being civil and in leadership challenges, to show empathy to people and make sure that the citizens come first. We're in this together. You're elected. You would be elected, would be hiring me, and to do that in leadership, you have to take care. And I know this is a boots on the ground job here in Fort Myers. You're small enough, and you show that with your team leadership here, and that's a great approach. It's too big a job for one guy to delegate everything, and to have that team approach and to work with the constituents and the volunteers are very important on this island. I see that.
Thank you.
Council Woodson.
So can you briefly summarize your career path and how it has prepared you for this role?
Yes, I started out when I was 17 years old, working for cities, given the choice, you want to be a lifeguard or you want to run a jackhammer. I, of course, was qualified CPR and trained to be a lifeguard. And I said, I want to run a jackhammer. I was a 17-year-old kid, 175 pounds, playing college football. So I said, I'll run a jackhammer and get a little bigger. I think I overdid it, but
I can relate.
that food control has been a managing process. Went to school, played college football, graduated with a double majored in history, pre-law, and education since 12. Had an opportunity to teach high school and coach. However, it paid like $16,000 a year, and working for the city paid $22,000. Little did I know, started out as a water supervisor, worked my way up to the city of Barberton. By the time I was 25, I was a union president running 5 locals in town, and I negotiated all the contracts. The state used to come in and negotiate the contracts. I took it over at a young age. At that time, I applied for law school and grad school. Ended up going and getting my master's in public administrations. Mother passed away, left $2,500. From the $2,500, if you got A's and B's, they turned it over. And I ended up 10 years, 4 kids later, got my master's in public administration. Spent 19 years at Barberton, worked my way up from the street department to the cut and pay, the building department, was a building inspector, code enforcement. From there, I seen an opening in the planning department. So I was a code enforcement for the zoning officials, and planning was a staff. I wrote all the staff reports and so forth while I was in the planning department, and became the strategic planner, handled the capital improvement budget, both the narrative and the budgetary one for all the departments in the city of Barberton. From there, I got a call from the city of Aurora. They wanted a director of public services. Knew I was good with unions. They had some union issues. I took care of that. We had no union issues. I was there 17 years, had 1 grievance. I manage people well. I do the team effort to make sure I manage them well. 17 years at City of Aurora, I started as just a director of public services. After 4 years, the mayor, in his infinite wisdom, did not rehire the engineer. So I became the engineering director too. Kept doing it for no more money and just kept on plodding along. I had 5 engineers who were under me, and I'm a nationally certified planner. So I knew how to do it, but I knew how to stay off of the engineers' toes and work with them. So we would let up RFPs, did many projects in the city of Aurora. You know, it was mayor, went through with 3 mayors in the city of Aurora, and being the director of both, it was a great career step. And then after the city of Aurora, I retired. I thought I'd stay retired longer. I didn't. At 53, I ended up going right back and managing it's Manaway. It's Manaway Village. It's only 1,000. It had some water problems. And in Aurora, I had to negotiate Cleveland Water and brought it all the way to the southern part of Portage County. So then they had a water problem that was getting so high, about $300 a month. And it was not sustainable. There would have been a ghost town for that small thousand. A friend of mine was mayor. I told her I'd help her out, and we did. I thought I'd go there for 1 year, ended up 2. In the interim, I was offered a job at the county as superintendent, general superintendent. Key thing about that, it was only 4 days in the summer, 4 10s, and I had Fridays off. I got to golf once in a while. It was really nice, but I ended up, instead of golfing, working for the village still, and working for the village both Fridays, Saturdays, and Sunday. Did that for about 2 years, and that brought me to where I am. And then they changed. A politician came in. A friend of mine that was hired, he ended up actually moved to Fort Myers Beach down here in the city, and the new engineer said he's going in a different direction. But those that brought me to here, you know, the city of Barberton had 28,000. Manaway had 1,000. The county, I managed 370 miles of roads and 152 bridges, and it was 166,000 people and 3 commissioners. And I was to go between the commissioner and the engineer, and had a lot of responsibilities with that. We dealt with a lot of the FEMA stuff, the EPA, environmental documents, handle that grant process and manage it and make sure all the documents are kept in the right place at the right time, and the auditor can come look at it any time. It's very important. Budget process, and at first, that responsibility of the CIP, I handled the entire budget process and delivered it to the mayor so he could actually do his budget. So I had all the capital improvements and operating and deliver it to him. That was also a CDBG entitlement community, so we had to manage those. Got about $1 million to use to match water line, sewer line replacements, or even those 80-20 federal matches. You can use that 20 for the 80% and be a total match project over several years. So I handled that originally, and then in Aurora, I handled all the utilities, both enterprises funds and the water and sewer, and eventually in stormwater too. So those utilities, I managed all those in Aurora from 1.2 to 1.6, and then another 1.7 at the other We had a $12 million capital budget in the city of Aurora, which allowed us great latitude and turned over all the trucks and got those. You know, they went from just having snowplows that were multi-use to single use. That was very fortunate having a community that had that much capital to improve. The budget, we had a zero-based budgeting at Aurora. One mayor had to do that. We did the entire process with that. It was very long, very tedious to go all the way back to zero and look at every cut and see what's going on. And then the new mayors would go about 2% to maybe 3%, depending on the union contracts and the raises, to try to keep the budgets right there. So my budgets would range from $3 to $6 million direct control, but to 225 of the budget of the city of Aurora. We had many projects. I had a couple of projects even where in front of the first Department of Transportation, multi-year projects involved. Used to be SeaWorld there. We widened the street. We ended up about $12 million project, $6 million each year. And I really had to lobby District 4 to get the payments all at once. They wanted to give us all at once to us to make our portion of the payment of that 20%, even for a community such as that. You know, resources are always finite. There's limited resources. So I finally the first project to get it split between the 2 years and actually make the payments. They didn't get their money up front. They got it 1 year and then the next. And so budget was pretty successful and never went over budget. Always under budget. My departments that I would look over.
That's great. Thank you.
All right, John, thanks. How would you approach budgeting for our small municipality with the limited revenue streams and fluctuating property values due to disaster impacts?
I think the CDBG-DR relief and make sure we spent that properly so that we can spend things to get the CIP eventually. Take those disaster funds and not only the town's coming really along with the public properties, but the private also. We need to be transparent and help those a little along the way. We necessarily wouldn't have to do all the work for them, but show them where to go and help the private property owners. And that way we can keep taxes down also as we get through this process and look for other avenues for leveraging and matching dollars. And actually the private-public partnership has to be developed a little more, and everybody's working on it every day. But that private-public partnership and work towards it, because I believe the unique situation and how everybody pitches in here, they'd be ready for that, and especially with the FEMA funds, which are definitely limited in only so many years.
Thanks, John. John?
What do you see as the greatest challenge for the next Fort Myers Beach town manager?
I think developing those coalitions that are needed to be developed. I know Andy's had some with the state, Tallahassee and DC, and then also Dan has. Keep those going, those coalitions going and respectable. That way, when there comes times, there's always competing interests. And in those competing interests, you can agree to disagree without great problems at a time. So at least you have the basis and the knowledge, whether it's going to lunch, going to dinner, going to HOA, being visible in the community, and actually working with the community members, helping them out if you can. And use my knowledge over the last 43 years to help not only the government structure, but also the community members.
Thank you.
Your last answer just sort of addressed part of the question that I'm about to ask. It's about relationship building skills. Could you comment on how you've prioritized the skills of relationship building and give some specific examples of where you've utilized them to advance the interests of the communities you've served in the past?
Yes, the relationship skills are very important to build those community relationships. For instance, I use a coaching approach. I coach high school kids, and everybody's kid was going to go, to college or pro. Unfortunately, not so. But the balancing the parents and everything else with that was a challenging area in my year. But I know that would train me for what I do now. And you have to take sympathy and empathy and know the passion some people have. This is all the money they have, putting eggs in one basket. You can understand that you got to figure out how they're going to do this and stay one step ahead. And how I've done it in the past, I was on the technical advisory committee for the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and city of Akron, the bigger city in the Cleveland area, they used to take all the money and take all the matching. We got tired of that, and I decided to sit on the technical advisory committee, became the chairman in both 05 and 17, and the 15 years prior to that, I was always coming to the meetings. They're sometimes just running the gavel, the other times you're running the process. So I figured out in the process, you get on the grant making committee and score those grants and everything else, you could eventually change it. So I changed the process, got it a little straightened out, and the smaller communities were given some equity. They're on par equity with the bigger communities, and everybody was a distribution of the money equally over different 5-year periods. And that's how I changed the system. And if we need more, we would go to the State House and change the State House for local government sharing and so forth. Lobby at the State House for that.
Thank you.
So if you had critics, what would your critics say about your leadership and how do you respond to that feedback?
I think if I had critics, they saying he coaches too much. You know, I empower the employees. You know, I know both sides of, you don't have unions here, but I know both sides of the fence, how the employees are feeling toward managers and how managers feel to employees. And I like to empower employees, as I've seen here, which Andy has done most recently, making those employees come up through the ranks. They can see the light through the tunnel. They're not job hopping like a lot of younger employees have done today in today's market and economy. And to that issue, probably, you know, sometimes you're too lenient. You shouldn't give them this empowerment, but you have to give empowerment and employment and make sure they're part of the picture. Like I said, this is too much for one man to do. Needs a community of employees, constituents, and residents to bring this community back where it's going now.
Thank you.
John, tell us a time when you led your community through a period of significant change or recovery. What were the key challenges and how did you prioritize action?
I think probably two communities, both the Village of Manaway, when they were having problems with water and sewer, and how do we deal with this from rates going up to $300 a month and making it unsustainable for 1,000 residents. What we did was set up an RFP, and that RFP was to sell both water and the sewer, water tower and all the lines and sewer plants. So we set the RFP, and the county's the only one bid on it. A couple other private tried to at first, but then they backed out. So we took that and we took it over to the county. We got multiple grants. Matter of fact, got $1 million grants for the water line and the backup water supply for the county. And so it was a win-win situation for the village and the county. And to do that, today that community is thriving and water rates are almost back down to $65 a month instead of that $300. So that's what he did in both Manaway, but also the city of Aurora. Challenge event. We had SeaWorld there, SeaWorld and Six Flags. Very challenging with the tourists and the road widening and everything else. They were coming in and closing down SeaWorld, but we had a widening project going on. But with that widening project, we also had it was force main, excuse me, not force main, but a transmission line, main water line coming down from Cleveland. So same time we were widening the road, the parks were closing, and we still had $12 million on the table. But the water lines were necessary to bring it down. Unfortunately, the north tower was higher than the south, so we had to pump it clear up north and then back to the south. The forefathers in their infinite wisdom did not put the tower high enough. You know, 4 feet would have done it, but it didn't work. So 5 different pressure stations, pump stations that had to all come combined. So it was a trying time, and the residents, the water was very hard at that time, and residents complained if they don't tap water and it's hard. They just did. So the city of Ravenna was, the county was selling Ravenna water, which wasn't good. So to transition that water over from Cleveland, from the county water to Cleveland was very important. And at the same time, a major road project with that main coming up through, from Cleveland, from Frost Road to Cleveland down through, it was 2.5 to 3 miles of water main that we brought down. And we did that through federal funding and some CMAQ partnered about 4 different grants to make it to no cost to the citizens, besides a little bit of the capital improvement dollars we had put away.
Okay, great. Thank you.
John, what strategies would you use to build consensus among council members, staff, community stakeholders with diverse opinions?
Diverse opinions are easy. I negotiate contracts. I understand there. We got to start somewhere we have common ground and then build from there. A lot of people will be passionate. Everybody's going to be passionate. But we live here in Fort Myers. We would decide, you know, at least we have one goal common and work from that that commonality, understanding each other, respect it, keep it civil when they're doing it, and try to reach those goals. And those coalitions as you build prior to, hopefully you've developed enough respect for each other that you can agree to disagree and help one another in any other time when maybe you don't disagree.
All right, thank you, John.
Thanks so much.
We're gonna
Again, thank you for the
Yeah.
opportunity, and I appreciate how hospitality you showed us.
Yes, thank you, John.
Thank you. Okay.
We're gonna discuss now and we'll let you guys know.
Public comment.
Oh, yes. We'll now open it up for public comment. John, would you like
John.
to? All right, we will close public comment.
Would you want to take a break or?
We're gonna take a break for
Wanna
a
take
few.
Yeah, take a break.
All right, we'll take a brief 10-minute break and we'll come back at 2:50. All right. All right, we'll call this meeting back to order. We've now heard from all 5 of the potential candidates. We've had private meetings with them. We've now had public questions for them. Discussion. Anybody like to discuss any of the candidates, or does anybody feel that they are not comfortable moving forward with any of the candidates? And we have to go back to the drawing board. We'll start with there. John, are you comfortable with making a decision?
You know, I don't know, Mayor. I'm still kind of torn about some things. I guess if I go forward, I've got one person, but I'm not sure how comfortable I feel, honestly.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
I am comfortable moving forward. I would suggest procedurally, if we all come to an agreement on a selection, and for whatever reason, and I don't mean to be pessimistic, because I'm optimistic, and hopefully it all works out in terms of negotiations and so forth. I would like to suggest that if that top candidate if we're unsuccessful in reaching a negotiated, agreement with that candidate, that we
Over to Nancy or Amy?
Our streaming has stopped for a moment, I've just been told.
Okay, we'll back up and
Okay.
run.
And
I'll
we're
put the-
back.
Who unplugged the cord?
What?
We can go back in time.
Okay, so we are going to announce they're going to ratify. And then they'll vote.
I'm going to read each person's ranking order.
3-step process.
You have certified.
Well, that's for
That's better. That's a better word.
Thank you.
Ready back in the back? Okay. Counselor Safford. In first rank, or number 1, is Will McCanney. 2 is Jeremy Schaefer. 3, Michael Brillhart. 4, Patrick Jordan. And 5, John True.
Okay.
Mayor Allers. Number 1 is Will McCanney. Number
One.
Will McCanney. Number 2.
Hold on, we're on the wrong person.
Oh, this is Mayor Allers. Sorry. Yep. Number 2 is Jeremy Schaefer. Number 3 is John True. 4, Patrick Jordan. 5, Michael Brillhart. Vice Mayor Adderholt. Number 1, Will McCanney. Number 2, John True. Number 3, Patrick Jordan. Number 4, Jeremy Schaefer. Number 5, Michael Brillhart. Okay, Counselor Woodson. Number 1 is Will McCanney. Number 2, John True. 3, Jeremy Schaefer. 4, Patrick Jordan. 5, Michael Brillhart. And Counselor King. Number 1, William McCanney. 2, Jeremy Schaefer. 3, Patrick Jordan. 4, John True. 5, Michael Brillhart.
Should have been told at the bottom.
Yeah, the total's wrong.
Yeah, the total.
Let's do some.
I mean, it's up.
So it's like golf, the low score
Just hit
wins.
some, and then highlight those four.
Give us a moment.
I'm not sure what's so hard. It looks like there's only one
Yeah.
person to go
Well,
forward.
right.
because-
I can say the lowest score up there would be Will McCanney. I just don't know the ranking of the four the other direction.
There you go.
So from, do you want me to go from bottom to top or top to bottom?
Either way.
Okay, with a score of 5, the lowest score on the board is Will McCanney. The next lowest would be Jeremy Schaefer with a total score of 13. John True with a total score of 16. Patrick Jordan has a score of 18, and Michael Brillhart with a score of 23.
Okay.
They have to certify, right?
Right. So the next step in your process would be for you to certify that this is a true and accurate depiction of your votes.
So moved.
John, is that a true and accurate depiction of your vote?
Yes, it was.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Yes, it was.
Counselor Safford?
Yes, it is.
Counselor Woodson?
Yes.
And mine is as well.
Okay. And so the next step would be if there is a motion to consistent with the vote to appoint Will, and you're going to have to help me with this last
McCanney.
McCanney.
Point of
McCanney.
order. Point of order. Wouldn't they
Negotiate.
make a motion to go into contract negotiations?
Mhm.
Not to appoint him yet to you.
Right.
Oh,
To-
yes,
to
yes,
move
okay.
forward.
You're
Contract.
correct. To move forward to negotiate a contract leading to an ultimate appointment at a future date.
Mr. Mayor,
He's correct.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we move forward with the appointment process of William McKenna,
Negotiating.
negotiating process, and that we appoint Counselor Woodson to be the council liaison to that negotiation process.
I second that.
Okay, got a motion by Vice Mayor Adderholt, seconded by Counselor Safford. Any further discussion? Do you want
I'm great with that. Thank you
Should
very
be
much.
a roll call.
Okay, Vice Mayor Adderholt?
Aye.
Counselor Safford?
Aye.
Counselor Woodson?
Aye.
Counselor King?
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Motion carries unanimously. Can you bring in Mr. McCanney?
It's getting closer for you.
You guys didn't unplug it back there again, did you? Like it's still here?
Yeah, we actually had somebody complain they couldn't hear Jim, and I was stunned, but
We almost made it by 3.
Mhm.
We almost made it by 3.
Are they together in the room or they're in
I don't
separate
know.
rooms?
I'm not sure.
Are they together in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you went through the process, were you all in
We
the same?
stayed in the little lobby area.
Did you?
Right there.
Shelby's in there too? Okay. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, Jeremy, you've heard the news that you were selected unanimously by the council to begin contract negotiations. Counselor Woodson is going to be our liaison to work with you to hopefully put together a contract to bring you on board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, council, for the opportunity. I very much look forward to it.
So you'll come for $100 a
To be determined.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for Will before we?
No.
I just want to say for the record, Will, first of all, congratulations. But
Thank you.
second of all, how important it is that the council, independent of each other, you were the number one choice of each individual counselor.
Mhm.
So you've got unanimous support from the town of Fort Myers Beach to be our next successful town manager. So congratulations.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that.
All right.
So I'm looking forward, the next steps would be to this, what is this
Well,
next
it's the
steps?
negotiation, and what
Okay.
we would probably do is work with a draft of Andy's contract and then make whatever changes we need to as a starting point. Counselor?
Okay. Okay, and thank you, council members, for having me involved in this. I really appreciate it.
I think you're going to do a great job, and thank you guys for finding him.
Yeah.
Hey,
Great job.
If I can say to Lisa and the whole staff did an excellent job. The whole process was seamless, very professional, really made us feel welcome from the very beginning. So thank you.
It's a great staff and we look forward to you joining it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I look forward to it as well.
Thank you so much.
If I may.
Yes, sir.
No,
Yes.
only if you use
Only
a,
if it's
only
voted
if
down.
you-
He said we got one no vote, one yes vote.
only if you-
Yes.
only if you use a fake
Yes.
southern accent.
No say.
That's the way it works here.
I'm learning.
I'm here to help as much as possible.
Thank you.
My official last date's 30th. We have put on an agenda item on Monday to extend it for 30 days. So I'll be at your disposal, whatever need. And Talisa has my contact information and we'll get that to you.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate transparency there.
Perfect. Anything else? All right. John?
Move to adjourn.
All right. Got a motion here?
Second.
I got a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?